Labor unions. Yes, yes. That's what we're looking at today. All right, labor unions. What are labor unions in the first place? Well, labor unions. A union is a partnership, but it's a group of people who are getting together to fight for their rights. And when it comes to labor, they're fighting for their rights when it comes to work. Um, Now, unions have been around for a while. They began forming in the mid 1800s, but really they started gaining a lot of power. Industrialism started to arise. The first unions were mostly rather small. Um, you have things like the railroad brotherhoods, where you have railroad workers who band together and they fight for their rights, namely workers. When we talk about all periods of time, they're fighting for two main rights. They want higher wages and shorter working hours. And you also have things like better working conditions and things like that. But generally, higher wages and shorter hours are the two main arguments. So these first unions, you can see an image here. In 1850s, you have railroad workers on strike, and when you have people that are generally fighting for their livelihood, things often turn violent, and that's what happens when it comes to a lot of strikes, protests, and other things. So one of the first big labor unions that's a national organization is the Knights of Labor. It's started by a guy named Terence Powderly, and initially their name is the Noble and Holy Order of the Knights of Labor, which is quite large and concerned some, namely churches. So they were just changed to the Knights of Labor. So this is Terence Powderly, and they really were fighting for an 8-hour workday, which was a big one, and rights of the workers. They were a pretty progressive group. They very much like to include women, African Americans, and they're mostly for skilled laborers, so people that have a certain skill, and they're fighting to get them what they think they deserve. Now, unions have a lot of tactics. Namely, they just start bargaining. They're an agent that bargains between workers and a business. So instead of workers going and trying to get their bosses to pay them more or lower their hours, you have a union official who goes and speaks for the workers. Um, so if these meetings don't go well, then you have a lot of things. You have slowdown strikes. The workers start slowing down. They're not as productive. You can organize boycotts of goods, and you can just organize walkouts where workers just walk out of the company. So Knights of Labor, they're generally a good group. They do have some problems. Certainly, they are quite racist against Chinese laborers in the West, and at one point were responsible for some race riots, which resulted in the deaths of 28 Chinese Americans. And you also have incidents where people that are forced out of work, namely there's 50 African American cane sugar laborers. They were murdered by some thugs. So they were striking, but there were some people that were set out to hurt those that were striking, and you had a bunch of people get murdered in Louisiana. So you have a lot of violence surrounding them. But really, the end of the Knights of Labor comes with the Haymarket Incident. So Haymarket is in Illinois, and you have people, namely that they're protesting for their rights. They're fighting for their rights as workers, organized by the Knights of Labor, and they're demonstrating in Haymarket Square, Chicago. It was a peaceful rally, which turned into was namely in response to police brutality. They'd been striking, these workers had been striking, the police were carrying out some violence to stop the protests. So they rally in Haymarket Square, and they're bringing workers together during this very big gathering of workers. Someone throws a bomb at the police, and well, you have a number of police officers killed, and you have civilians killed. So it was a very ugly event for labor unions. So the Knights of Labor ends up going under. They were replaced by a group known as the American Federation of Labor. This guy's name is Samuel Gompers. Fantastic mustache in the background. Samuel Gompers starts it. He actually was with a cigar makers union. But he organized the AFL, which in some forms is still around today. And they're also working with skilled workers. So they're working with, we have coal miners here. So you have coal miner strikes. They're working with people that are builders. So they're very much fighting for the strikes, once again, of skilled laborers. They're bringing people together, thousands of workers together. Some of these places you have an enormous amount of workers. And they can rally these people and try to get better conditions for them. One of the most infamous events for the AFL in the early years is known as the Pullman strikes. And Pullman strikes, this is the Pullman factory, and it's located also in Illinois. Pullman Company, they made railroad cars. Now, if you remember, we have people that are worth billions of dollars at this time in today's money, so they like to travel in style. They're not rolling around in a subway car where you have to hang on to a metal bar above you. No, they're going on cars like this, where you have nice seats, you have beautiful workmanship there. I mean, these cars are works of art, and they're luxury, utter luxury. So you have people building these Pullman cars. If you recall, you also have Pullman towns, where the company owns all of the shops, all of the homes. So the workers thought they should be treated better. The workers go on strike, they walk out. This is a photograph of them walking out of the factory. So workers go on strike and start protesting to get higher wages, shorter hours. The Pullman Company hires a number of guards. They also end up bringing in the, I believe it's the U.S. Marshals. So you have military soldiers coming in. There's killings, workers are killed, and eventually the strike in failure. Sorry, it was not the U.S. Marshals. They ended up just sending straight up army in there. But even though often these violent strikes are the ones that gain a lot of attention, we talk about, the are very successful. If you look at this map in general, so these are real wages. So pretty much how much people are making in regards to how much their cost of living are. It starts in 1540, so a long time ago, and goes all the way up to 1900. Around the time when unions start, so 1850s to 1860s, you see real wages going up exponentially. So unions are very much getting rights for people. They're getting higher wages and very much getting closer to that 8-hour day that people